Show this morning. I hope you've downloaded the Salem News Channel so you can watch us live as we bring you the news. I also hope you've got my podcast ready. If you happen to have missed part of the key broadcast, we always make sure in highly concentrated Hugh. There is the news, there are interviews that make a difference in your life, and there's new monologues whenever I have the time to do a special take for you on a particular issue. Look, the big story of the morning is inflation. Yesterday after the show, the Wall Street Journal reported that the producer price index, which measures the prices that suppliers are charging businesses so that they charge higher prices to other customers, rose a seasonally adjusted 0.4% last month, compared with a revised 0.2% decrease. So in 1 month, producer prices went up 0.6%. Higher food prices and home heating costs drove that increase. The PPI rose 8.5% in September from a year before, down from its 8.7% annual increase in August and its 11.3% increase in June. As this tells you, later on you'll hear me talk about Federal Reserve is going to keep raising interest rates, keep crushing various parts of the economy, keep making you pay more for cars, more for credit card debt, more for adjustable rate interest on anything that you bought on time, whether it's a refrigerator, a washer, a dryer. Inflation is still out of control. President Biden still will not pay any attention to that. By now, you should have heard that the jury ordered Alex Jones to pay more than $950 million to Sandy Hook families for defamation. He'll spend the rest of his life digging out of bankruptcy and digging out of creditor lawsuits. Don't lie about kids who've been murdered in a massacre that's horrific. Just don't. It's a good recipe for having people remember you as a scoundrel and punish you with a punitive judgment verdict, which is intended to deter other people in similar situations from doing similar things. And I think that will indeed have that effect. The United States and the Allies vowed long-term support for Ukraine. The G7 got together yesterday. They said, we are going to be there from the beginning to the end for you. Do not worry. We will stand by you. I hope that is the case because the missiles continue to rain down on Ukraine for a third consecutive day as Putin vents his anger over his showcase bridge being blown up by Ukrainian partisans. From the New York Times comes a lengthy, quote, investigation of Leonard Leo. Now, I think I've met Leonard Leo once. We're not good friends. I literally think it's once. We were having lunch together in the Senate dining room once when we were at different tables with different senators. And my host asked me how the day was going. I said, great, but who is that senator having lunch with? Because I kind of knew this. I thought you knew Leonard Leo. And I said, well, I met Leonard in 2004 in New York at a cafe across from the Harvard Club when I was having lunch. So I had a lovely conversation with him in 2004, but that's 18 years ago. So I don't know Leonard Leo. I'm not the joining type. I don't belong to the Federalist Society. I have nothing to do with any of his organizations. I don't know what he's up to. Other than that, he built the Federalist Society into a key repository of talent and learning for originalists. Much like the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Federalist Society has been out there on the front line. Now, the Federalist Society trains up people, encourages, and gathers in a network effect organization. Alliance Defending Freedom brings the lawsuits. Alliance Defending Freedom actually teaches the law students how to be great lawyers and to commit a lot of their pro bono time to productive activities protecting religious liberty and free speech. Please support Alliance Defending Freedom. Lawyers take care of the Federalist Society. And I'm going to come back to the Leonard Leo project here in a moment. Lawyers do the Federalist Society, and they do it very well. Plus, Leonard's got some great donors. Good for him. You are the donors that support Alliance Defending Freedom. And Alliance Defending Freedom protects the religious liberty of every American every day. Kristen Wagner will be joining me later in the show. So take some time this morning, please, and go over to the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com and become one of the people who care about the Constitution, who care deeply. It's your lodestone. It's on which you pivot everywhere. You'll defend people, defend the Constitution. It's why Mike Lee's got to win in Utah, for example. Mike Lee is committed to the Constitution. He's one of the better constitutional lawyers. He clerked for Justice Alito. Mike Lee, Senator Lee from Utah, is a wonderful senator. And he's being challenged by the Never-Trumper, and the Never-Trumpers got the Democrats not to run anyone so they could say, oh, look over here, this guy's a Republican. He's not, Utah. He's not a Republican. He's running as an independent. He's a lefty. And he will ruin the ability to confirm conservative judges and to turn back left-wing judges so that the Alliance Defending Freedom, when they bring their lawsuits, have a chance of winning. So please, not only support Mike Lee in Utah, but go over to the ADF banner at the top at HughHewitt.com. Takes a second to load. You click HughHewitt.com, and for you Steelers fans, HughHewitt.com. You click it, and up it loads, and then you click that, and you give them $50. It becomes $100 because they have a match. Thank you, supporting ADF. Leonard Leo got a big profile in the New York Times, and it's a hit piece. It's a hit piece because Leonard has spent his life being effective. He's built an extraordinary network organization that supports the idea of an originalist approach to the Constitution. And of course he gets attacked by the New York Times. Profiled is the term they use, but it's just a receptacle into which people can say bad things. There's not a little anti-Catholic bias in the attacks on Leonard Leo. He's a very Catholic man, very, I think the time I met him in New York, he gave me a rosary. I think that was the guy. Leonard's a very good guy who's done a lot of great work and has put forward a lot of good effort to reform the courts of the United States, and he's being attacked by the New York Times. What else is new? From Ellis Items this morning. You know, the last thing I read before I come on the air is Ellis Items, a Substack. Item number 20. Mark Zuckerberg is trying to establish Meta platforms as the virtual reality company in the minds of consumers. Something that will become infinitely harder to do once Apple jumps in with its mixed reality headset. Reportedly in 2023. I didn't know Apple was going to do the same thing. But, you see people with the headsets. That's all Facebook Meta stuff. Well, Apple decided they're going after that hardware. They're going to unveil their own headset. And do you know what that means? That means that the $3,000 Apple headset, roughly double the price of what Zuckerberg charges, will be what kids want. They will want the Apple design. Because even though Meta has a lot more experience in virtual reality, kids will want the Apple product. That's a big hit to Facebook this morning. In the Los Angeles controversy regarding the racist Latino members of the Los Angeles City Council, the one who actually used the offensive language resigned yesterday. She quit. Nuri Martinez, before Joe Biden arrived in town to raise money, everybody in town said, you got to get off the council. You got to stop being the face of the Democratic Party. So they drove the Latino councilwoman out. Her two Latino colleagues, Gil Cedillo and Kevin De Leon, as well as Ron Herrera, who is president of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, these three men, part of the Latino political establishment, don't have to quit. They were in the room and made no objection when the derogatory racist comments were made by Nuri Martinez, but they don't have to walk the plank. One sacrifice is enough to the Moloch of the left. And so that one is done. Now, the big story of the day, the story I'm coming back to in segment 3, is this. ACT test scores dropped to the lowest in 30 years in pandemic slide. You say, why does that concern me? Well, that is a broad measure, a very broad measure, from east to west and north to south, of how high school students in their junior year are doing. Okay, so what have they learned? Where could they? For them, it's about getting into college. For us, it's about how's the education system doing K through 11. Where they take the ACT in their junior year, some take it in their senior year. And let me read it to you from the AP. Scores on the ACT college admissions test by this year's high school graduates hit their lowest point in more than 30 years. The latest evidence of the enormity of learning disruption during the pandemic. The class of 2022's average ACT composite score, remember the best you can do here is a 36. If you take the test and you're perfect, used to be an 800 on the SAT verbal and an 800 on the SAT math. The ACT has one score, it goes up to 36. If you're in 25, 26 land, you're getting into college everywhere. The 32s get in everywhere. But normally, you got to get 21, 22 to get into the local big state school, and you can prove yourself there. The class of 2022's average ACT composite score was 19.8. The first time since 1991 that score has been below 20. So we are at the lowest point in 30 years of educational achievement in the high school. Do not vote for one incumbent school board member. I'm going to talk more about this in segment 3 today. Not one. Do not vote for one incumbent school board member. Vote for those who are saying we're firing superintendents, we're bringing in new superintendents, and we're destroying the unions. We're going back to teaching kids so they're not stupid at the end of 11 years of school. I'll be right back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Battleground Tour, Mike Gallagher and I and some of the local folks are getting together to talk about Michigan politics and the state of the nation. I'll run through the Senate. I'll run through the conversations I've been having in the Beltway over the last 72 hours. I'm feeling very good for the Republicans, very bad for the country. And I'm going to come back and talk about the ACTs. But first, I want you to hear from Rachel Mitchell. Rachel Mitchell is the county attorney in Maricopa County. That's Phoenix. That's the Phoenix metro area. Think of it as the prosecutor in San Francisco, the prosecutor in LA, and the prosecutor in Philadelphia, with the exception is that Rachel prosecutes people. And so Phoenix has got an active law enforcement presence on the streets in Phoenix. But if you're listening in Prescott, you're listening in Tucson, you've got to listen to this very closely too, because George Soros is backing a left-wing nut to be the Maricopa County prosecutor. And another left-wing nut, no bail, what, us arrest you, let's run away and we'll get you another day, defund the police kind of person. You don't need that, Phoenix. You've got a great county attorney in Rachel Mitchell. And I talked to her yesterday after the show. Here's that interview. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Rachel Mitchell. She is the county attorney for Maricopa County, and I wanted to have her on because Maricopa County is Phoenix, and if Phoenix does not reelect Rachel, they're going to end up with a Soros prosecutor and crime going through the ceiling. Good morning, Rachel. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Talk to me about the campaign. Do people know you're running against a Soros-backed, would-be left-wing liberal prosecutor?
I think the people that are paying attention to the race are becoming very quickly aware of that because of her extreme policies. This is a little bit of an unusual race because I'm completing the term of a county attorney that stepped down, so I'm running at a time that the county attorney normally would not run. And so they're paying attention to statewide races, and it's very important that they understand the importance of the Maricopa County attorney.
Rachel, would you explain to people how vast I knew Bill Montgomery very well. He used to come on whenever I wanted a county prosecutor's view of the world. What's your view of the street crime level in Phoenix right now, and what would happen if they go to, for example, cash bail, no cash bail, or any of the other wacky approaches that Soros prosecutors have used? What would happen in Phoenix?
I mean, as you know, we're seeing a higher crime rate across the country, but those numbers are even higher when we get into Soros prosecutor-controlled areas. And we've already seen an attempt to lower the amounts of bail in our state, and it's had bad effects. Basically, you have a dwindling number of police officers trying to arrest and then re-arrest and then re-arrest the same individuals that are getting out and committing these crimes. Her idea is to defund the police, develop a unit to target police within our office for prosecution, and get rid of cash bail and reduce the prison population. She doesn't say the criteria for that. She just is throwing out percentages.
Rachel Mitchell, I find it astonishing that anyone would seriously consider a Soros prosecutor after the experiences of San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia. I really do. I think it's impossible to vote for one of them knowing what happened in those cities. But I'm not sure. Is the Phoenix media covering this race?
The Phoenix media does cover the case, but as you can imagine, there is a large focus by the media on the abortion issue, which is clearly misplaced to focus on this race for that issue. That is an issue for the legislature. The county attorney is a law enforcer, not a lawmaker.
So let's close by talking about the scope of the duty. You've been in the job a while now. You're very good at it. Everyone I know in Phoenix says that Rachel Mitchell's doing a fine job. How many cases are you prosecuting? I mean, how big is the workload?
It's a massive office. It is a 1,000-person office. We have 350 prosecutors, plus we have 50 civil attorneys as well. We get close to about 40,000 cases a year. And as you can imagine, caseloads are high right now. So it is, if people are watching local news and they see a crime committed within Maricopa County, which is over 4 million people, there's a 90+% chance that it's going to be prosecuted by my office. It's not the Attorney General. And so this is a vital office to keep the community safe.
Rachel, what is your website, your campaign website, if people want to help you?
Sure, it is Rachel Mitchell from Maricopa.com.
Rachel Mitchell from Maricopa.com. And it's election day. People can vote early, all that, but they've got to go down the ballot, not just Kerry Lake, not just Blake Masters. They have to go down the ballot to find Rachel Mitchell. Same ballot, right? But just further down.
Same ballot, but very, very important race.
Oh, absolutely. Rachel Mitchell, I can't imagine Phoenix with a Soros prosecutor. Good luck to you. Continued good luck to you. And I hope come back before the election to remind people in Maricopa County they've got to vote for Rachel Mitchell. Thank you, Rachel.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now I got to tell you, you've got to vote for Rachel Mitchell, Phoenix. But if you're in Prescott, if you're in Tucson, call everyone you know. You do not want a Soros prosecutor running Phoenix. You just don't. Maricopa County. The numbers are in on Jake Tapper's. Remember, I was watching the Yankees beat the Guardians last night. Not last night, the night before last. And I was wondering who watched Jake Tapper. Turns out nobody. The demo, 25 to 54, the key demo. A grand total of 211,000 people watched CNN tonight for Joe Biden. Joe Biden attracted 211,000 people, 25 to 54. I don't know how many people I'm talking to, 25 to 54 right now, but it's way more than 211,000. You're going to work, you're listening to me, and when you do the whole gross number, I just don't know if you can save CNN. I just don't. You get the President of the United States, never gives an interview. You get a lot of promotion. You try and get everyone in the world to watch, and you get 211,000 people. I mean, it's not gum on the shoe. It's just that nobody trusts CNN. And how do you rebuild that? Well, you got to tear it all down. Now, my phone number is 1-800-520-1234. I'm going to reread this to you and then ask you if you care. ACT test scores dropped to lowest in 30 years in pandemic slide. Scores on the ACT college admissions test for this year's high school graduates hit their lowest point in more than 30 years. The latest evidence of the enormity of learning disruption during the pandemic. The class of 2022's ACT composite score was 19.8 out of 36, marking the first time since 1991 that the average score was below 20. What's more, an increasing number of high school students failed to meet any of the benchmarks that they set for the ACT, showing a decline in preparedness for college-level coursework. The test scores made public Wednesday show 42% of ACT tested graduates in the class of 2022 met none of the subject benchmarks in English, reading, science, and math, which are indicators of how well test takers are expected to perform in corresponding college courses. All right, it is an utter disaster what happened to 9th and 10th and 11th graders and what happened on down the line. And it's going to require a few common sense things. People have got to go to summer school next summer. You've got to fire old teachers who do not know what they're doing. You've got to get rid of terrible teachers. And you may have to put your kids in private school and you may have to get a tutor. And you're saying to yourself, well, they're doing pretty well. I mean, they're getting an 8. They're not learning anything. The ACT doesn't lie. The ACT is an unemotional mechanic. And for years, the equity gang have hated the SAT and the ACT because they don't like the numbers that came out. They want everyone to score the same because all human beings are created equal in God's eyes. That's a Jeffersonian Declaration of Independence statement, and I agree with it. But not all people can take standardized tests. You know, I had 3 kids, 3 very different test takers, 3 very different test takers. I am one of those little annoying people that can take a test and pass. I can take the California bar exam 6 years after law school and pass it without sweating much. I didn't even take the ACT because I was one of those things called a National Merit Scholar. And when you get the National Merit Scholarship on the PSAT, you just show up, mail in your SAT, and you get in to colleges that are doing lottos for Ohio students. That's how I got into Harvard. Not a legacy, nothing like that. Just a good test taker. It may not be the best way to admit people to students, but it's not the worst way. And it's not really admissions that I'm worried about here. I'm worried about the collapse of American public education. I see people are calling. Can we screen a couple of those calls, Jacob? I would love to talk to them. 1-800-520-1234. I just believe that the complete collapse of American public education is going to be the driving iceberg issue, and now there's more data for it landing on a planet near you. Now, if you go to your newspaper, you're going to find all sorts of headlines about Kyiv, which is great. You're going to find out all sorts of headlines about, I gather the Washington Post has got a Donald Trump classified paper story. And I look at the Wall Street Journal headlines, and I see, the Journal is a normal newspaper. Inflation data could give clues on Fed steps. TikTok parents set sights on Spotify. Samsung gets exemption from chip restrictions. Russia hits Ukraine, Kyiv. You know what the biggest story is? That the AP crashed. That students, for this country's health, the AP crashed. Greg in Pennsylvania. Good morning, Greg. What do you think about this story?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. How are you doing? Let me just take you off speaker 1 second. Get the phone away. Okay. Listen, I have educators in my family. My sister's a professor in a university in Maryland. My other sister-in-law is a school psychologist in charge of a whole school district. Teachers all the time. And I just dread that these teachers are going to start blaming the students for not being able to learn.
I don't think that's the case. I just think people are giving up. The exodus of teachers, I don't know about your family members, but I think the exodus of teachers is significant. A lot of them have ghosted their districts. They can't hire. They don't pay. And I got to say this. Your sister's a school psychologist?
Well, my sister-in-law, yes.
Do you know what she makes a year being a school psychologist?
I think, she's in charge of the district. She makes probably about 98.
What do you think? I think she makes more than 98.
Well, she's in northern Jersey, so I'm not sure what.
Yeah, she's going to make more than 98. And I hate for people to hear this, but district school psychologists, they should find new jobs. I would methodically, I would go through every school district and fire everyone who wasn't a classroom teacher, upon whom no individual student's livelihood depends. I'd fire everyone except the school nurses. I'd get only principals who are in the classroom. We just have to load up on teaching, and we have to do it now.
Just on this last note, and I know you got more calls, I would just like to say the children in elementary school are more important than the children in middle school, I think, right now.
Well, I think I'm for actually educating everyone and catching everybody up. But thank you for the call, Gregory. Let me go to Atlanta and Lawton. Hey, Atlanta and Lawton, how are you? Lawton?
Lawton,
yeah.
Hugh, Lawton, Hydrick, Atlanta. I just want to make sure that everybody gets the point that although it could have been COVID contributed, our public schools are abysmal. And I don't want people to get the impression that it was just COVID and we're going to rebound. I'd like to see what those scores were right before COVID. And I bet they were pretty low as well.
It's a new low, but I want to emphasize what you are saying. It is not just COVID. It is the collapse of methodology. It's the infusion of ideology. It's the commitment of resources to non-classroom teachers. It is a disaster everywhere, and public education has to be dismantled and replaced with a healthy voucher system. I'll be right back, like Arizona did. Lawton, thank you. More calls coming up, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. My guest this segment is Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. He's an American-born Israeli. And Dr. Oren and I are about the same age. I think he's about 6 months older than I am. And so we went matriculated at the same time. He went off to Columbia. I went off to Harvard. Good morning, Michael. I have a completely out of left field question for you this morning.
Okay. I'm older than everybody, Hugh.
You're older than everybody. But, I loved your book so much. To All Who Call in Truth, your novel of 2021. I've recommended it to many, many people because of the way it captures the 1970s, almost pitch perfect. But today, a story in the United States is that the ACT tests have reached a 30-year low. They are below where they were 30 years ago. Now, you and I got out of high school 45 years ago, but all that technology, all that learning, all that everything, are you not surprised that ACTs are the lowest they have been in 30 years?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. They've been under constant assault, cultural assault. And they've been delegitimized to a great degree, and they're culturally insensitive, they're prejudiced, they're many things. I mean, we viewed these tests as sacrosanct, And by the way, I did terrible at them because I'm dyslexic.
Well, I was telling people they're
Amazing.
not the be all and the end all because some people can't take tests, but I'm one of those people that just do tests. What do they do in Israel? I mean, how do kids end up in their secondary school and their colleges in Israel?
They take tests. They're standardized tests, but mostly we have almost like a French system, a baccalaureate system. And to graduate high school, you have to take tests in all of your subjects. And it's a nightmare, but it's on the basis of those tests that you get accepted to universities.
So it's a meritocracy.
Yeah, it is very different in America. In Israel, when I get a resume, I don't care what university you went to in Israel. They're all more or less the same. I care what unit you were in the Army. The Army does far better vetting than any university.
How interesting.
Not to insult you Harvard graduates, but, it proves that you were good at taking tests.
Yes.
The Army's going to tell me whether you were a leader, tells me you accept the responsibility, tells me whether you're brave, whether you can get along in teamwork. So I look at what unit you're in and what rank you reach.
And is Israel a meritocracy, Michael Oren? Because I fear the United States has lost its ability to claim that it is.
Israel is a meritocracy on steroids. I met a young woman who came back from the United States, an Israeli, and I asked her, this was a few weeks ago, I said, how is it coming back? She said, it's very difficult. And I said, why is it difficult? She says, well, in America, you can more or less get on by being mediocre, but in Israel, you have to be superb. And that's it's highly, highly competitive place.
Yeah, I just wish people could get a whiff of the innovation that comes when you allow people to succeed based on merit, and they do not believe that they will be blocked as a result of political correctness, ideology, or something else. Okay, Michael, there were riots in East Jerusalem last night. Are they significant? Is it a big deal that's going on, or is this just the ordinary October in Israel?
Well, let me start by saying I'm outside a house in central Israel, a lovely house in a beautiful neighborhood. It's the house belonging to Noah Lazar, an 18-year-old border police woman in a combat unit who was shot and killed 2 days ago in Jerusalem, here at the Shiva, where the family just stepped out to talk to you. And there are hundreds of people here. So we're paying a price for this.
What is her name?
Her name was Noah Lazar, just short of her 19th birthday.
Noah
just a
Lazar.
Wonderful, brave, beautiful young woman who now will not, grow up and get married and have children and grandchildren, everything you want from life. So I'm here with her parents, and I just talking to her uncle and their family from Long Island, and it's intensely personal. I try to go to many of these memorial shivas as I can. I'm actually a president of an NGO that supports the border police. So go back to your question. It's serious. I'm told from my sources in Judea and Samaria that there are actually far more attempted terrorist attacks than are actually making the news. It's a low-grade war. We experience this periodically. I think the major precipitating issue here is the breakdown of the Palestinian Authority. It's just finally falling apart, falling apart on its own rotten corruptions, foundations, because it's so corrupt and so unpopular, and it's lost effective control over the northern part of what you would call the West Bank. Samaria, of Nablus and Jenin, are now effectively in the hands of Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
So that bodes very ill for the future of peace in Israel.
It bodes ill for our ability to conduct a peaceful life. And yes, we're going to have to be on our guard. We're always on our guard, but I think this is going to have to be stepped up to high alert.
Well, no, would you do me one favor, Dr. Oren, which is to relay to the family of Noah Lazar that, an American audience heard her name this morning and thanked them for their sacrifice for protecting freedom. That's every parent's nightmare. And it happens in Israel all too often because of ethnic violence and anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And we appreciate your calling in from the Shiva. Thank you, Michael. Follow him on Twitter at Dr. Michael Oren. And don't forget that book, To All Who Call Him Truth. It's a really remarkable book. And says, joined us. Good morning, JD. How are you?
Hey, you. How are you?
I'm great. I want to talk to you about one story and then the campaign generally. The ACT scores were released yesterday, JD. They are the lowest in the country in 30 years. That's back to when you were in high school, when your mama and the United States Marine Corps saved you. What do you think, after all the technology and all the money, to have ACTs go to a 30-year low? What does that tell you?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, we clearly are just not as good at teaching children as we like to be. And I suspect that the fact that so many of our schools are focused on social justice these days and not on actually educating children, focused on the woke stuff and not on getting kids to know, reading, writing, and arithmetic is probably something that's starting to show some effect. And the second thing, of course, Hugh, is that we shut down schools in this country for 2 years. And I think we probably saw catastrophic short-term losses in learning. And the big question for us as a country, as a society, is whether we can recover those losses in the next couple of years, or whether we effectively set, an entire generation of kids back a couple of years in their learning. And I hope that we can get it back. I fear that we're going to realize what a catastrophic mistake we made.
Now, JD Vance, for those of you who are new, one of my new audience members somewhere, whether it's in Rhode Island or up in upstate New York or Pennsylvania, I've known JD since his book came out, A Hillbilly Elegy, and we talked about it at the time it came out. But I've known Tim Ryan for 35 years. Tim is a friend of mine. We both went to the same Catholic private high school. So Tim and I had the benefits of private education. JD Vance went to a public. I can't recall whether teachers were a big part of saving you, JD, because I haven't read Hillbilly Elegy in a few years. But did your high school help you out, or was it Mama and the Marine Corps, like I said?
Well, definitely, Mamaw and the Marine Corps get a lot of credit, but we had great teachers at our high school. And, I still have a couple of teachers I keep in touch with today, very good people, people who gave me a great education and really, took an interest in me. And the SET was, I think, part of what allowed me to go to college, of course, because even as a lot of colleges are eliminating standardized test scores, standardized test scores is actually, one of the ways in which, especially working and middle class kids, can show that they can hang with some of their more privileged peers at these schools. So I think eliminating standardized testing just generally is a way of actually hurting a lot of working class kids. But man, I got a great education. It wasn't perfect, of course, and there were some kids who fell behind. But I really worry about what's going on in our public schools these days. I mean, frankly, Hugh, I worry about what's going on in our private schools these days, because I hear a lot that some of our private schools, I think, have made some of the same mistakes of our public schools.
I think parents are marching to the poll. By the way, you're ahead in the latest poll this morning. Add 6, you'll be up 7. Because the Hill and Emerson never get it right, and even they are showing you ahead of Tim. You're going to win. I'm just curious, do you think this is a federal issue? I do. I think it's gotten to the point where the feds have to start holding money back from schools that do not change to allow parents to escape. What do you think about it, JD?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, a lot of the money that goes into developing curriculum is handed out at the federal level. A lot of the pressure, I think, for these schools to adopt a more socially progressive agenda is happening at the federal level. So I want state and local control as much as possible. But if the federal government's sticking its nose in the education business, I think those like me who are running for Senate and want to represent the people of Ohio, we have to make sure they're not sticking their nose in a really negative way. And unfortunately, I fear that's what the feds are doing right now.
JD, can I talk to you about why the visceral reaction to you among Blue Bubble elite? I think about this a lot because JD is so Ohio through and through. The Ohio State University, the Marines, a public education kid, very difficult life growing up. I think they despise you because you went to Yale Law School and you have turned on the Blue Bubble elites. And I don't think despise is too large a term. If they could take one person out, JD, I think it would be you.
That's exactly right, Hugh. Yeah, that's why I encourage your listeners to support us at jdvance.com and help us fight back against that media machine. Because, no, you're right. I think that these guys, they almost feel like they welcomed me into their bubble. They offered me a spot at the table, and I looked around and thought, I don't want to be here, guys. I don't think you guys are interesting enough, and I don't think that you're ruling the country effectively, despite the fact that, of course, the Blue Bubble has had all the power for the past 30 or 40 years. So I definitely think you're right about that. And, look, there's a little bit of a dynamic here where they don't want to be challenged. They don't want to be called out on their problems. And, whether it's longer term issues like trade and the loss of the manufacturing base to China, or more short term issues like you guys were completely moronic to shut down every school in the country, sometimes for over a year. These guys really don't like to shape up to their own failure. They don't like to own up to their own mistakes, and that's certainly not something I'm interested in. I'm interested in actually throwing those mistakes in their faces and saying, let's do better for the people that we care about.
JD, in fact, I want to stay on this for a moment because when I mention blue bubble elites, I'm talking primarily about legacy media in New York and Washington, D.C., along with Hollywood funders like Rob Reiner and Silicon Valley people who've turned their back on one of their own with JD Vance. But when you're allowed to come to the table and you get your Yale law degree, everybody in the blue bubble assumes, well, we saved this poor kid from Ohio and we've given him a Yale law degree. He'll be like us. He will applaud liberal elitism. And you don't, and boy, are they angry, JD.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's just exactly what's going on. People hate heretics almost more than they dislike people who never practice the faith to begin with. And that's true if we're talking about a religious faith or something that's a little more ethereal. And look, these guys definitely see me as somebody that they welcomed into their clan, and I turned my back on them. And, look, it's just, who wants to sit around and be part of the conventional wisdom all the time? If you look at where the media is these days, if you look at the topics that you're allowed to discuss, the thoughts that you're allowed to have in your head, the reason people like you, the reason people like Tucker Carlson have higher ratings than a lot of the traditional corporate media is because you guys are actually willing to say the things you're not allowed to say. And that's just a lot more interesting.
Well, it is more interesting to talk about what the ACT collapse means, but let's go to politics. We got to win. We got to win Ohio. You're ahead. I don't know where your greatest strength is, whether it's the Mahoning, Trumbull, Steel Valley, where Donald Trump did the best, whether it's Dayton and Cincinnati, which are traditionally Republican suburbs. Where is your strength, J.D. Vance?
It's definitely in southern Ohio. That's where I'm from. I grew up in the Cincinnati area. Middletown is about 45 miles north of Cincinnati. So I've got a lot of family there. I've got a lot of friends there, and that's just because of the book where people know me the best. Obviously, southeastern Ohio, because that's the big Appalachian part of our state. Not a whole lot of voters there, but they've shifted very hard to Republicans in the last 10 years, and they tend to go for me pretty hard. That was definitely our area of strength in the primary. And then, if you look into eastern Ohio, Columbiana County, Trumbull, Mahoning, not quite Cuyahoga County, which, of course, is still very left-wing, a lot of those counties are starting to move to the right pretty aggressively, and that's a good thing. And I think even though, of course, that's Tim Ryan, your buddy's congressional district, the evidence is that those voters really feel abandoned by the Democratic Party, and so they're moving to Republicans, and I certainly expect them to move to our area as well. I think that the thing that I worry about, obviously, we've got to do well in the suburbs. A lot of undecided voters still in the suburbs, moderates, center-right voters who should break for me, but we've got to do the work and make sure they do.
Now, and that people can help at jdvance.com. I've said for a long time the fault line in American politics begins in Pittsburgh, runs up the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, turns left at the lake, and goes all the way to Wisconsin. You didn't mention Ashtabula County, but I think Ashtabula, Mahoning, Trumbull, Columbiana are key J.D. Vance districts because they are the burnt-over district. They've been left behind by everyone. They can't get anything started. I know Intel's coming to Columbus, and that's great. I know Governor DeWine's going to win by 20 points. I think you're going to win by 10. But that is where the revolution has occurred, is in the northeastern corner of the state, J.D. Vance. And I think your numbers at your rally blew the doors off the didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, we had close to 12,000 people there when President Trump came to town and rallied in Youngstown. Obviously, very energetic crowd, and I agree with you. I think that we're going to do very well in that northeastern part of the state, especially outside of Cuyahoga County. And I think when we do, we'll win.
Now, I'm going to be at 98.9's event in Columbus next week. I just want to talk about the Columbus suburbs because that is the sort of high-tech new area of town where a lot of people are moving to are not from Ohio. I think, JD, your high-tech cred works there. How is the reception, whether it's Upper Arlington, whether it's out at Jack's Course, the whole horseshoe around the horseshoe?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think obviously the further you get out, so when you start talking about Licking County, certainly Delaware County, we do pretty well there, and we should win those counties. When you talk about Franklin County, that's where I think we have a lot of work to do. And, really what's happening, Hugh, there is, of course, a lot of the suburban upper-educated professionals have turned away from the Republican brand. It's not necessarily something specific to our campaign. But we have to figure out how to get as many of those folks back into the Republican Party as possible. The tension here, again, not just in my race, but in the Republican Party nationally, is that as we pick up a lot of white working class voters, traditional blue collar Dems, there's some stress in the coalition between those voters and the suburban moderates. And I think that, really the game to play here is to try to get as many of those suburban moderates in the tent and encourage those blue-collar Democrats to continue coming over to our side. And I think if we can strike that balance the right way, we'll turn Ohio red for the next 50 years.
Suburban moderates care about education, JD, and you're hitting the right notes. And that ACT story should scare the heck out of the moms who are listening. Thank you, JD Vance. Go help JD out at jdvance.com. Come right back. Laxalt. Hey, Adam, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for having me.
6 out of the last 7 polls show that you are ahead of the invisible senator, Senator Cortez Masto. How do you feel about those polling numbers? I always think they understate Republican support.
Look, we couldn't feel better about this race right now. It's been a long road, especially the summer when a lot of people weren't paying attention to these races. We have run the race that we wanted to run all throughout, and here we are. We're in October. When it counts, we're ahead in this race. We're ahead, like you said, in every poll that's been out. Real Clear has us up on the average as well. And, we are peaking when we need to be peaking. She was able to just attack me all summer with all these false attack ads. And, they basically emptied the barrel. And the bottom line is, people understand in their gut that we're losing this country and we're losing my state. It's going the wrong direction in every single way that you can measure. And people are ready for change. And so once you get
Adam,
go ahead.
Let's go to the website to make sure people can help you out. In fact, I gave a very blunt piece of advice. I got asked by someone, I've got limited funds. I want to invest them where they matter. And I said, send them to Adam Laxalt. So that's I'm out there. People know that if you've got $100, you send it to Adam Laxalt because that's the one we got to win. How's it going on the resources side?
Yeah, AdamLaxalt.com. As long as we have grassroots conservatives supporting us from across the country, we're going to be able to fill our budget. We're going to be able to get the truth on the air. And I can tell you there's some messages the voters haven't heard yet. That's because of the discrepancy in money. We have some great messages to close this race. And again, we're already ahead, but we're going to put our foot on the gas, and we're going to close this thing out.
So, Adam, 2 questions to be quick about 2 big issues. ACT scores yesterday released. They hit a 30-year low, and the producer price index went up to 6.5% year over year. Inflation hasn't cooled. Education continues to decline. What do people talk to you most about of those 2 things?
Look, in our state, inflation's 16%. Gas, you could pay over $6, and that is what's on people's mind. I mean, the economy's doing poorly here. People can't get by. I mean, the stories of moms that are no longer putting juice in their kids' lunches and they're having to substitute it for water. People having to drive less, change their entire lifestyle. I mean, look at what the Biden administration is doing. The only way they bring inflation down is to have Americans stop using stuff as much, to stop driving as much, to stop buying as much. That is not where we want our economy to be. That is, I assure you, not what Nevadans want. They don't want to get messages from our sole energy provider that you have to keep your thermostat at 78 degrees in the blazing hot summer of Las Vegas. We'll see if we get something similar in the middle of the winter. People understand that Joe Biden is not up to the job, and Senator Masto has been a rubber stamp for Joe Biden. She votes with him almost 100% of the time. And finally, the messages, the ads are showing people her record. She ran commercials all summer hiding from Joe Biden, pretending she's a moderate. The reason you're seeing us up in the polls is because people are finally seeing the truth, and they know that we need something different here in Nevada.
AdamLaxalt.com. Last question. In terms of the overall economy, when discretionary income vanishes, I assume that the tourism economy of Nevada, both north and south, suffers.
Yeah, it's interesting because COVID, they shut the whole state down, and the casinos were open for the most part, but with limited, limited staff. And I think because of all the government money and all the free money, I mean, people have been gambling. And so for the Strip itself, the Strip's doing okay. It's the small businesses across the valley that were decimated and they aren't coming back. And it's, as we know, people's retirement has been hit. the daily life of people that chose to be here for a low tax state with a lot of opportunities to do things out in town, they're the ones that can't afford daily life here in Las Vegas. And that's why you're seeing these huge shifts in Hispanics. You're seeing huge shifts in Las Vegas in general, where they're going to be moving away from Democrats here in November.
All right, very last question. Do people care that you're a military veteran, that you're Navy? Do people even care in Nevada? It matters in places like North Carolina and Ohio.
Yeah, look,
How about Nevada?
I think it's a huge deal. We have a couple 100,000 veterans. I'm the only Navy and Iraq veteran in the race. People absolutely have Afghanistan seared into their brain. They know Joe Biden. It was one of the biggest disasters we've had in foreign policy in a generation or more. They know Senator Masto didn't speak out against it. She hasn't asked for hearings. She hasn't asked for Milley to be fired. We are a big military state. We have 2 huge bases, one in Vegas. We have Nellis. We have in Fallon, we have, the Naval Air Station, and it's a huge deal with Top Gun. And so it's a big deal. It's a big contrast for us with my opponent, especially in the crazy world we're living right now. I think people understand we're fundamentally less safe under Joe Biden as the commander-in-chief.
We need another veteran in the Senate. That would be Adam Laxalt. Go to adamlaxalt.com. He's going to be the next senator from Nevada. Adam, I hope we talk to you again before the election. Thanks for joining us.
We got to do it. Thanks so much. Let's go win this thing.
You bet. adamlaxalt.com.